This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the, for 1 week only, Maxime Luku of website builder. So quick and easy to use, like Luku himself, you can have a full website together in mere minutes. And again, like the Bordeaux Baldy, it's a service so smooth, so easy to put together that keeps everything ticking over for you. You have to do no work, much like Matthew Jalabert running a game. Entire storefronts constructed and able to start selling your products within mere minutes, with everything automated and ready for you. And Squarespace and your SEO tools make them so much more discoverable than ever. And if you want to follow suit and make your own website, then why not head to the link in the description and use the offer code SquidRugby to save yourself a money on a website. We'll see you there. There's so many options. We're not yet halfway through 2025, and yet already its curvy mug is set to be printed over rugby history books forevermore. No team has ever scored more tries in a single men's Six Nations championship than France this year. No team has ever scored more tries in a single women's Six Nations championship than England this year. And no team has ever scored more tries in a single Rugby Europe championship than Georgia this year. In fact, you can go one further. All three major international tournaments played so far this year saw more tries scored by all teams combined than any other year in all three competitions' history. The men's Six Nations record stood for 22 years and the women's for just 1, but it doesn't really matter. There are currently, right now in 2025, more tries being scored in virtually every single professional competition than at any other point in the history of rugby union. As we enter the close season of all 7 major pro leagues, 6 are currently on track to register more average tries per match than any other season in the competition's history. And for every URC or PWR narrowly surpassing them by 0.1 or 0.2 of a try, there's a Premiership jumping from an average of 7 tries to 8, or Super Rugby from 7.1 to 8.5. An astonishing figure. In fact, the only league not majorly up on tries scored at the minute is the top 14, where they're very narrowly down on a record-setting year in 2023-24. Look at what losing Antoine does for your competition this season. And whilst the reasons behind this are multitude, the new kick laws are playing a big part in this, the rise in tries comes primarily down to one simple factor. We are currently in a phase where the world's best attack coaches have figured out how to beat the last wave of innovations from the world's best defense coaches. And they did it not through complicated shape or pattern, but a flick of the wrist. One tiny, minuscule little tactic has broken rugby wide open and revolutionized the game, leading to almost double the number of tries being scored in 2025 as in 2022. So, what is this tactic? Why is it so effective? Where did it come from? What other innovations have affected this? Why are so many tries being scored nowadays? And can the impact of these handful of factors last now that the Seans and Jacques and Felixes of the world are starting to clock on? In 2019, one of those lads, Jacques Nienaber, and the Springboks pioneered a stunning and innovative new style of defence. Instead of spreading a team out evenly, they congested their dudes into the centre of the field, allowing the likes of Eben Etzebeth and Peter Septitoy to charge out a line and cause massive pressure, putting in big shots, whilst the wings appeared basically unmarked, creating kind of optical illusion of space out there, but the defence was designed so that it could close off that space before the ball got there. Players instantly, once the play got outside them, turning and sprinting to the touchline, making up that ground quickly. Over the following 4 years, every single team in professional rugby took elements from this, adapting it to their own purposes, style, personnel, and it left defence enormously on top of attack. Because breaking down the defence was now harder than it had ever been, the easiest way to advance down the field became to kick. Booting the ball became the core of everybody's tactics, teams rarely playing more than 2 or 3 phases of possession. Indeed, from 2021 to about 2023, with every phase you played beyond number 3 at international level, the chance of you scoring a try decreased. A drastic change from 2017 to 19, where phase play was king, where the more phases you played, the more likely you were to score. Nienaber's system had created a world where defence simply set quicker than attacks by focusing on the middle of the field rather than spreading equally. So teams learned to use the boot. Unless you were on the opposition try line, most teams kicked the ball away somewhere around phase 4. However, the months following the 2023 World Cup were filled with immediate optimism. With the pressure of the World Cup now off, coaches all all over the world started looking to attack, and as such, came to adapt the most interesting attacking philosophy that developed over the last few years, the positionless rugby strategy. Eddie Jones had sacrificed both England and Australia to the rugby gods in order to create. Ultimately, right, Eddie Jones' positionless rugby just means instead of playing a set formation, instead of setting into a shape such as the 1-3-3-1 is the most famous of these, the team would adjust formation on the fly. They would form groups of 3 or 5 or whatever, depending on the fly half or the fullback, calling these pods, but also calling shapes and structures, phase on phase. Sometimes you want maybe 2 centres playing off each other here together based on how the opposition line up. This might not have won the Tasmanian Devil his World Cup, as I slightly too excitedly predicted 3 years ago now, but I actually wasn't that far wrong in many ways. Once this strategy clicked, it did indeed prove pretty unbeatable. Attack started getting on top. A defence designed to eat up structured play was undone by a new system that didn't dispose of structure but blew it up a bit. Maybe think of it like, instead of one giant Swiss clock with loads of gears all over the place, all interlocking and creating this beautiful system, effective attacks now are more like smaller sets of individual gears, all turning and motivating, controlling their part of the attack. Individual units instead of one big collective whole. Stopping one gear spinning, as a big shot by Etzebeth or Dutoy or whoever else, could no longer ground everything to a hole in the entire team, because the next set of wheels were unconnected and hence still in motion. Teams could keep playing. However, this attack was not what truly changed the game. Over the course of the 2023-24 season, as teams globbed onto this tactic, the number of tries actually decreased from the previous season, whilst the figure was now around 4 or 5 phases before your chances started going down rather than 3. Going beyond a certain phase count still did decrease your likelihood of scoring, yet we saw more and more teams risking it, willing to keep the ball in hand despite the possibility of a turnover, a knock-on, or whatever, hoping they would be the team to change it all. A lot, like Razzie Rasmus admitted, knowing this shift to the attacking game must be on the horizon. Meanwhile, however, a separate revolution was going on in France, wouldn't you know it? Since the moment his goggles first crossed the coaching threshold, King of France Fabien Galthié has made no secret his fondness for unstructured play. And whilst Test Rugby can't just be you pissing about, lobbing it left and right, even if you are coaching France, Galthié and then attack coach Laurent Lebede sought to create as many situations as possible where the likes of Antoine Dupont, Roman Untermatt, Thomas Ramos, Damien Penaud, all the endless flowing talent they had in the team, could rely on their raw ability instead of trying to do the kind of drilled pattern play that we saw Ireland become so good at. Galthié's approach was like an anti-game plan, a game plan to break the game plan. This began with a very smart kicking game that we've discussed so many times on this channel that opened more chances to counterattack, but it was quickly supplemented because the easiest way to create unstructured scenarios is simply to beat oppositions into shape, to get your attack going before the defensive line is set. As such, France had to, if they were to play Galthié's way, play the fastest rugby in the world. Reducing the time the ball is in the ruck has been rugby's arm race ever since Eddie Jones first slashed the Brumbies average from 11 seconds to 5 in the 90s. Wayne Smith and countless others with the All Blacks worked successfully to get down to about 3 seconds over the following 15 years, yet Galthié was desperate. He had to get it even lower, down to ideally 1 second. As part of this effort, he put a real focus on players' groundwork, their ball presentation, and then, somewhere around 2021, the thought hit him, right across the goggles. Why even have une ruck at all? That's what he actually sounds like. A few years earlier, with the inaugural Olympic Sevens on the horizon, a ginger lad from Wimbledon managed to somehow unlock the true potential of Fijian rugby. Ben Ryan's out-the-box thinking essentially created a brand new uber-Fijian style of playing the game. The idea was to keep the ball alive at all times. At feeder and warm-up tournaments, he would challenge his team to go entire games without a single ruck whilst they're in possession. Everything was to be offloaded. Skills built over a lifetime were honed with some genius drills such as training games where every player had to hold a second ball under one arm on top of the main pill they were playing with. He slowly built out, almost inarguably, the best Sevens team the world had ever seen, all by leaning so hard into the nation's characteristics as a rugby team, into offloading, into avoiding rucks, into keeping the ball alive. It was a revolution. It changed Sevens, but Fabien Galthié was now looking to replicate this in 15s. Now, everyone throwing backdoor offloads all the time and never taking tackles might sound great to Thomas Ramos, but it was never realistically going to work on the 15-player code. For one, it's impractical. The risk of losing a ball is so much greater, but perhaps more importantly, it's très difficile to attack if you're not taking bodies out of the defensive line by forcing them to make tackles, getting them to deck, opening up space in the defensive line because the other guy is still getting off the floor. So Galtier's question remained. How do you beat those defenders into shape? How do you reverse Nineber's innovations? The answer was there in Ben Ryan's genius strategy, except Galtier just had to be a little less myopic. You don't take the strategy, you take the philosophy. France looked, wherever possible, to remove the ruck. Tackles were still being taken, but instead of presenting the ball back, wherever possible, they would pop the ball right up into Antoine Dupont, or Maxi Blue, whoever's at scrum half's hands. This knocked 2-3 full seconds off every phase of possession and allowed them to attack a less structured defence, still scrambling after the last tackle. The offload is traditionally used to bring a runner onto the ball, but this was a brand new usage of it. The offload for playmaking, not for strike running. It allowed Antoine to snipe, yes, but mostly for France to play faster and critically wider. This is a perfect example from the World Cup. The French attack has got incredibly loose here, shapeless, and the Kiwi defence is completely on top. As the ball gets wide to Damien Penaud, he's boxed in. He's got very few options. But instead of the traditional approach of trying to make what yards he can and just taking the tackle and presenting the ball back, France want to keep this ball alive because they know that presents their best chance of scoring a try. So he does a Penaud and darts in field, running most of the width of the pitch. But instead of presenting the ball back, he does this. Aldry and Crow here don't go into the ruck. They just float by him, knowing this is a possibility, as he pops the ball up. They spread it immediately wide, and France are now suddenly back on the front foot. Because the Blacks have scrambled from one touchline to the other to even make this tackle, there's suddenly space around the ruck and Aldry can exploit it. A more old school offload to Dupont, almost creating a try. This was something France did constantly. These pops off the floor, bringing speed into the game even if the scrum half wasn't there. France had discovered something major, and a few teams locked onto it. The All Blacks and Argentina both loved this offload, but it became rarer at club level. Because the risks were so great when the speed of the game is that split second slower, your scrum half might not be in position. The opposition open side are less of a threat, so you can still keep quick ball. It just didn't pay off in the same way. These two tactics, the Gautier offload and Eddie's positionless rugby, continued to advance to get wider and wider spread over the course of the last 2 seasons, particularly at international level, and in those players beginning to filter them down into their specific clubs. Positionless rugby in particular became pretty mainstream. Virtually every team now uses at least elements of what Jones was chasing with England at the expense of his job back in 2022. The 23-24 team awash with teams trying his strategy on for size. However, it wasn't until the second half of that season that we really started to see a shift. But when it came almost all at once. The all-round teams like Leinster, Saracens men and women, and the Crusaders, who dominated club rugby for most of the last decade, all started to slip away at once. Some more drastically than others, but competitions that felt like a foregone conclusion changed in the final stages. In their places, titles expected to be won by those teams were instead taken by Glasgow, by Gloucester Hartpury, by Northampton, by the Blues, by Toulouse. Admittedly, Toulouse kind of ticked both categories. All 5 of those, the team with the best attack in the competition. Rugby had swung big time into the attacking game. Those teams' defence being weaker than some of the other sides in the competition now became completely irrelevant. The name of the game, in a matter of weeks, mid-season, had shifted from a balanced approach to a simple, almost childish, how many tries can you score? That was all that mattered. Your try count won you the game. There were 2 very simple reasons. 1, teams were finally getting good enough at this tactic to deliver on the potential only Eddie saw way back in 2021. Positionless rugby is a complicated system to learn, especially as a fly half or the fullback calling the shape, and it takes time to adapt, especially if you want to make it efficient and have more than just 1 or 2 players able to step in and call that shape in case they end up on the floor being tackled. But number 2, at once, several teams seemed to see the vision and started combining these 2 completely disparate approaches to opening up Jacques Nienaber's defence, inventing a brand new tactic. Despite tries not increasing over the first 2/3 of that season, virtually every pro league saw a drastic increase in line breaks versus 2023 as teams adopted the positionless style. And yet so many of those, because Nienaber's system had improved backfield cover as well, were resulting in the ball carrier being tackled somewhere in the 22, teams getting into attacking shape and after 4, 5, 6 phases, losing the ball. Line breaks up drastically, but the actual number of tries being scored was not increasing until these 2 tactics came truly together to form something brand new. During the roaring success of the Squid Rugby live show at the swansea.org.uk stadium a month or so ago, I'd say, our excellent, wonderful guest, Ospreys flanker and hero, Harry Deaves, brought up a brilliant stat that he'd had directly handed him by his coach. When their defence guru, Mark Jones, had taken over as head coach mid-season, he'd overseen a gradual shift in the Ospreys' playing style, largely based on one single statistic. When a team breaks the line, if there's a ruck, even just one phase, the chance it'll eventually become a try goes down by 54%. If you make a line break, you get tackled and you don't give it immediately, the chance of you scoring a try goes down 54%. To sum it up, this transformed the Ospreys' approach on attacking ball drastically. The core of almost all rugby tactics is fundamentally weighing up possession versus territory. But a stat like that, once you start to take it into account, changes the entire equation. Suddenly, the question isn't territory or possession, it's possession and territory versus points. Off virtually every line break, even half breaks, the Ospreys now do this since Mark Jones took over, just lobbing the ball in the air and hoping a teammate will run onto it. Think about it from a pure maths equation point of view. Your chance of scoring a try goes down by 54% if the ruck takes place, and this offload is probably a 50-50 shot at scoring. So in many ways, it becomes the safer, the better option, right? It's 46 versus 50. This is becoming increasingly widespread. Ever since Antoine hung this ball in the air for Arthur Vincent to score, it feels like season on season, more and more players have lent into his approach, and it's finally reaching critical mass. Taking the tackle, recycling the ball, has become basically a thing of the past. This is an era of Bordeaux, of Glasgow, of Northampton, of Jouet. Taking the Galtier offload and plonking it at the end of the line break has now seen it not only overcome the defensive line, but also the sweeping backfield cover. This offload has basically transformed the game. Despite finishing lower down the table, the Ospreys scored more tries than in any previous edition of the URC this season and had their highest tries to game ratio ever. So much on the very simple idea that it is easier to keep running forwards onto this ball than it is to turn, get back around, make the tackle, form a defensive line again. It's simple physics, it's momentum working for you. If you can get any support runners with you, the chance of you scoring if you just chuck this in the air go up so high. A version of this approach came to life a few years ago when Ronan O'Gara, during a post-match interview, coined the phrase KBA, or keep ball alive. These changes were already starting to spread throughout France before the Premiership and URC, but there's an additional wrinkle. For Ronan O'Gara and Mark Jones have more than just played in the 2007 World Cup in common. For O'Gara and Jones were the two Northern Hemisphere coaches brought over and mentored by now All Blacks boss Scott Robertson when he was at the Crusaders. So much of the Razor Robertson game plan is about moving the point of focus, about getting the ball miles away from the ruck as quickly as possible, so it makes total sense his two prodigies, now given head coach gigs of their own, would land on extremely similar innovations together, using Razor's DNA but also things happening in the wider rugby world to innovate. I'll be utterly fascinated to see how Robertson himself responds to these changes slowly taking place that have really bedded in since the last time he had the right to reply of having a team on the international rugby field. The last few years have seen the intensity and accuracy of rugby union soar upwards to brand new heights, but now the game is evolving beyond that. Thanks to players with a higher skill set than ever, teams who can attack with such fluency, and innovative coaches like Galtier, Jones, O'Gara, Robertson and Ryan, there have never before in the history of the game been more tries scored than right now. And whilst the Seans, Jacques, Felixes and so on of the world will be working on ways to quell the line breaks, I genuinely think the impact of this offload and the infinite tries it can create is here to stay.
Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks to everyone that supports the channel on Patreon. It makes such a difference in terms of us being able to do this and continue doing this. We have so much more coming. We did a video on the European Cup final, the Champions Cup final, a matter of days ago now. We have a video on Sasha Feinberg and Goma Zulu coming in the next week, possibly the most hyped and talked about player in the world at this very moment. We're going to look at Australia, we're going to look at the USA, we're going to look at loads more. There's a Lions tour to come, there's Summer Internationals to come, and we'll see you very soon for more of what I believe they call rugby, but I call more rugby.
Mae Mark Jones ar ei ffordd lawr at yr Yslis. Mae Mark Jones, be mae di bod na, mae'n di gael gair efo Phil Coconathinga. Mae'r dorf yn cymeradwy wrth i Kieran Williams.